Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Modern Customer Podcast. I'm your host, Blake Morgan. Today, my guest is somebody who's been on the show in the past, and he represents innovation, sustainability, and tech. And his name is David Sobie. He is the co-founder and vice president of Happy Returns, which was acquired recently by PayPal. Prior to Happy Returns, David served as CMO at Revolve Clothing. He's also been a senior executive for Outlook. He is the inventor of the box-free aggregated sustainable retail return. Happy Returns makes reverse logistics simple for everyone outside of the Amazon ecosystem. Their service allows vendors to keep more sales with returns software that intelligently suggests exchanges, gives shoppers choices to return the way they want at their 700 return bars nationwide, at the store, and by mail. David and I are talking about new developments at Happy Returns, how they expanded with PayPal since our last interview. Let's get to this show. I know you'll enjoy our conversation. David, welcome back. I was just telling you before we started recording, this is the third time I've gotten to interview you, which is amazing. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and I think I can remember just even talking about some of the cool things you were doing a few years ago. Obviously, we need to get into your story and the product, but I just bought a ton of Rothy's shoes. Luckily, I don't need to return any of them, but I remember, I think that was how I found out about what you were doing because you were one of the early Rothy's partners. I love Rothy's shoes.
Yep, they were an early customer of ours. They had some challenges with fit, which led to a lot of returns, and so we helped them with kind of a core part of the customer experience.
So in between interviewing you last time and now, I had a baby, and you know what happens when women have babies is their feet expand. So none of my Rothy's fit me anymore, so I had to buy a whole size up, which is funny but also weird. So fun fact.
Yeah,
But and you have kids, so maybe
it
hopefully
happened to
your
my
wife's feet.
it happened to my wife as well. Yeah, it happened to her as well. And I remember that kind of restocking the closet.
Right. It's like a fun problem. But let's talk about your amazing customer-focused business and your story for our audience who haven't heard of you before or got to listen to you. Give us the story of how you came into this amazing role that you're in now.
Yeah, so the long story short, about a decade ago, I was working for a flash sale retailer here in Los Angeles called Outlook. Outlook was online off price, so we were, 48-hour sales of designer brands at 50 to 75% off. Outlook ended up getting acquired by Nordstrom and became kind of the core of Nordstrom's online off-price business. So they had Nordstrom for full line and Nordstrom.com and then Nordstrom Rack, but didn't really have a online presence. And one of the programs that we worked on after the acquisition was letting our shoppers buy online, because we were online only with no stores, and return products to Nordstrom Rack. And the kind of insights that we gained working on that return to rack program directly led to founding the company. And it was, in really simple terms, if you give online shoppers the choice, return via mail or return in person, they overwhelmingly prefer to return in person to eliminate the hassle and weight of the mail. And so we started the company 7 years ago this summer. And the premise was kind of simple. It was, hey, we built the return to rack program. We want to now replicate this case study for all of the other brands like Outlook that are digital natives that don't have a parent company like Nordstrom. And our simple pitch when we went out to raise money was we enable buy online, return to store for retailers without stores. And so that was kind of the pitch. Fast forward 7 years, we grew the business and kind of proved the concept and reached a certain amount of scale. Our big news since the last time you and I spoke is that we were acquired by PayPal. And so in June of last year, we closed the acquisition. And so we are now a division of PayPal. And we now have much bigger aspirations because we are sort of the nucleus of PayPal's post-purchase efforts. And so while we started in returns and exchanges, we now have the opportunity to kind of think bigger. Everything kind of after a shopper hits the buy button, that whole experience of tracking an order, the sort of obviously the return and exchange experience, potentially reordering, that whole journey after the buy button is now what we spend our time thinking about.
Now that I'm talking with you and hearing what you've been up to lately, it makes so much sense to me that you were acquired by PayPal, because even just in my own shopping as a customer, even on my flight from Nashville last week, like that's how I bought my Wi-Fi, was PayPal checkout. And that's just easier than like whipping out my credit card on an airplane and, typing in every single number. Was that something that you pursued, or did PayPal hear about you?
Yeah, so they actually invested in a prior round of funding. So PayPal Ventures was one of our investors. They led our Series B round, and that closed in April 2019. They joined our board, and so we really got to know them as a business, and they got to know us through that period as a board member. And then when we went out to raise, a round of capital I guess it was in January of 2021. Those conversations about our growth turned into an opportunity to join PayPal full time. And so the acquisition, as I said, we signed the agreement in March, closed the deal in June. And what's kind of neat is, if you take a step back and you think about the original, why did PayPal exist? It was really around removing friction in the e-commerce experience and payments, right? And those of us that remember the early days of e-commerce, remember, people were concerned about using their credit card and shopping online using a card. PayPal came in and built a brand and a business around, protecting those purchases and making them secure and giving people confidence to shop online. Well, Happy Returns is kind of the same thing. We're about removing friction as well, right? And it's that friction of what happens after the buy button, what happens if it doesn't work. Being more confident in your ability to shop because it won't be painful if it doesn't work out. And the reality is a lot of e-commerce purchases don't work out because we can't try it on, we can't touch and feel the product. And so we're kind of, starting from the same premise of removing friction enables e-commerce to grow. And I think that's really, what PayPal saw in us was this idea of similar mission. Returns is a challenge that lots and lots of their merchants face, especially as more and more shopping happens online. So sort of a big problem that they were hearing about frequently from their merchants, and certainly something that they hear about from their shoppers is, I need to return this. And so I think we fit really well from a philosophy standpoint and a mission standpoint, right? Trying to remove friction from this experience to try to enable the growth of e-commerce is kind of core to what we do, and I think the roots of PayPal.
Yeah, so something that you know about, because you're knee deep in the data all the time, is just some of what you said, the friction of e-commerce. I mean, e-commerce has grown leaps and bounds, largely thanks to a digital world the last few years. So what are some of the biggest challenges facing e-commerce when we think about returns and issues with products that don't work out?
Yeah, well, so we tend to think about the problem through different lenses. We describe ourselves as being B to B to C. So we're B to B in that we sell software and reverse logistics services to merchants. We're B to C in that we serve those shoppers. And so kind of through those different lenses, the challenges we see is on the shopper side, no one wants to deal with the hassle and weight of the mail, right? Don't make me print a label. Don't make me find a box. Please don't make me deal with packing tape. Don't make me wait to get my money back, right? I want a simple process, which is what we've architected, right? Start online, get a QR code, and then drop your item off in person. I should say drop your return off in person. And at the time of drop off, that should trigger your refund or trigger your exchange. So that, from a consumer standpoint, it's really about making that process simple and efficient. On the merchant side, returns are very expensive and very complex, and not something that most merchants would describe as a core competence. If you ask an online retailer, what are you great at? They would talk about, their customer experience. They would talk about product. They would talk about their brand, what they stand for. None of them would say, oh, we're great at reverse logistics. But they would all say reverse logistics has a huge impact on our profitability, right? Because when you have to handle those items again, when you have to pay to get them back from the consumer and back on the shelf, huge impact on profitability. And so on the merchant side, it's really about trying to give their shoppers the best possible experience, because a good return and exchange experience increases lifetime value because it makes people more loyal to you. But really, it's about the lowest possible cost for that return, right? Because it's really hard to get rid of returns altogether. We all kind of shop differently online. And so if you kind of start from the premise that returns are going to be part of your e-commerce business, what you want as a merchant is you want the most cost-effective way to get the items back. And there, we employ really simple ideas, multiple items in the box, and using aggregation to reduce the cost per unit for the merchant. And we aggregate across merchants from the drop-off points to our regional processing hubs, and then shipping in bulk out of the hubs. Taking all of Revolve's returns from the East Coast or all of Everlane's returns from the West Coast and shipping them back, because we have those kind of regional aggregation points. So on the customer side, it's about a simple, easy process. On the merchant side, it's about giving customers, taking the worst part of shopping and making it actually enjoyable, and then providing the lowest possible cost. And then the third kind of silent stakeholder is really the planet. We're big on the idea of a more sustainable return. More sustainable return in our language means not using cardboard. So we use reusable totes in all of our shipping. It involves fewer shipments because we densely pack those totes, as opposed to single item returns out in a cardboard box that where the cardboard's going to go directly into the landfill, and there are multiple shipments. So by aggregating items together, there are fewer shipments. By shipping everything in reusable totes, we're able to eliminate the cardboard from the equation. And so on the sustainability side, it's really about being able to give consumers a choice, which is better for the planet.
So you said that your customer is B2B to C, and I'm sure you hear so much from your customers about what are the biggest challenges. It sounds like there are no shortage of challenges from, you call it reverse shipping, reverse logistics. With reverse logistics, even as a customer, I see such crazy behavior. Lately during COVID, we moved to the LA area. We had to buy a bunch of new stuff. A lot of the stuff was damaged, even from high-end companies. It just seems like a lot of stuff lately is a little bit flawed. And then, of course, when we call the company, they say, okay, just keep it, and we'll just send you a new one. It just seems like the reverse logistics for so many companies are just money pits. So do you actually also consult them on how to do better and how to be more effective and efficient with reverse logistics?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot in what you just described, right? There's supply chain challenges, just keeping the shelves stocked. Then there's sort of accuracy of picking orders. Then there's the where is the inventory? I'm sure you've had this experience. I had this today where, I ordered something a month ago, and I ordered multiple things. Part of the order has shipped to me, the other hasn't. It's supposed to be delivered this week, and when I inquired today, it's actually that's back ordered, so now it's not going to get to you till July. So there's, a lot of that stems from more kind of effective inventory management. That's not typically an area that we play in. Where we are effective is in the cost of getting items back, the speed of getting items back, and the efficiency of kind of, once the items are back to you, getting them back on your shelf. And so the way that we handle that is it's far more cost effective to ship multiple items in the box than it is individual boxes, right? Something on the order of, if you were to take 21-pound shipments and ship them, from LA, where I am, across the country to New York, 21-pound boxes are something like 85% more expensive than if you put all 20 items in one box and you shipped a 20-pound box across the country. So, that's essentially what we represent is that 20-pound box. So aggregation to drive down the cost. Speed is also really important. With happy returns, the shopper gets the refund or exchange when they drop the item off, which is really important because now the merchants don't have to worry about getting it back to the warehouse and getting it opened and in order to give the customer their money back. So it's a lot faster from a consumer refund or an exchange experience when the items are credited or the exchange issue is ordered at the time of drop off. And then if you think about the merchant and their warehouse, what we're sending them is pallets of returns with all of the information pushed electronically when it leaves our processing hub. That makes it a lot easier. If you're taking returns in, by the thousands and being able to handle them and process them, much easier to handle a consolidated shipment of returns than it is to open thousands of individual boxes. And so we kind of help with reverse, but really it's about the consumer experience and the speed with which that reverse can become ready to be shipped out as forward. Those are the areas that we help. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges in e-commerce logistics right now. Some of which stems back to just some of the supply chain challenges that are, that we read about every day in terms of, shipments being delayed and barges of inventory kind of queuing off the coast of California. And, those challenges are real. Where we help is really in the reverse logistics side.
Something I realized recently is now they charge you a restocking fee, like 15%. It's really expensive for some of these high-end items to spend 15%. If the product doesn't work out, you're charged. Is that something that you think companies should be doing, or should they just get smarter about the return process?
Yeah, great question and very timely. There was an article, I don't know if you saw it, about Zara starting to charge for
Oh, no,
returns,
I didn't.
and the backlash that they're facing from shoppers about starting to charge for returns. If you think about it, well, take a step back. I think what shoppers expect today is returns to be free, the same way they expect outbound shipping to be free. The reality is, free just is a question of who's subsidizing
Right.
them, right? Free means that the merchant is expected to pick up the tab as opposed to the shopper paying for it. Why are merchants charging for returns, or why would that calculus factor into Zara? Well, it's because these costs are real, right? Shipping costs have gotten more expensive. Labor in warehouses has gotten more expensive. Certainly, the cost of warehouses have gotten more expensive, and this is all stuff that's been pretty well documented with the rise of e-commerce, that all of these kind of underlying costs of managing your e-commerce operation have gotten more expensive. So what we counsel to our merchants that ask, we always kind of say, look, it's your policy, we're going to execute what you want. But what we counsel is, if it's important to your customers that there's a free option for returns, and you need to subsidize it, well, subsidize the one that is the most cost efficient for you, the lowest cost for you, the merchant. And that tends to be happy returns. And so what we find a lot of our merchants doing is starting to charge for returns by mail. Right? If I'm going to have a free option for returns, it's going to be happy returns. Why? Because it costs me less as a merchant. And so if I'm going to subsidize one, I'm going to subsidize the one that's least expensive for me. The other reason why they're confident in that is that as our drop-off network has grown, and that's probably the other kind of big change since you and I spoke last, is the number of drop-off points, the return bar locations, has grown to 5,000 now. And we had some big announcements with Staples last fall, and then one at the end of March with Ulta. And so we now have 5,000 places around the country where you can drop your item off. And I think that has given our merchant partners the confidence that, yeah, chances are there's going to be a happy returns location near you. And so, instead of printing the label and instead of boxing it up and instead of shipping it and waiting to get your money back, go drop it off at happy returns, right? It's going to be better for you and it's cheaper for the merchant. And so the size of the network and the fact that, we save them money versus the mail is I think, creating this, opportunity where they're using incentives, right? They're using, the incentive in the form of a fee, to use the mail in order to drive the behavior that they want.
Yeah, and you brought up the physical store. You mentioned Ulta Beauty and Staples. It just seems to me like the role of these stores is changing so much. Like, what is the actual role of the retail store anymore? Is it a place where we just stock inventory? Is it an experience store? You read up on all this stuff. You are in this every day. Any thoughts on the role of the retail store in a changing e-commerce world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I'll tell you, having recently been out trying to buy, I think, when you and I were chatting before we started, my son is graduating from middle school. And so I was out trying to help him buy a suit. And what we found was that many of the stores we went into, they would have very, very shallow inventory, right? And so, they would have something, but maybe not the SKU that we wanted in his size. And so we ended up, I think we probably bought, 5 or 6 items that day, and we probably only walked out with one. The other 5 were being shipped to us because they just weren't available in stores. So I think that, the store used to be, that's where you stuck all your inventory, and I think that's changing. I think the kind of bonobos guide shop model of, we have one of everything for you to try on, but we're going to do fulfillment through a central e-commerce warehouse. I think that's a lot more prevalent. I also think the number of kind of services and the utility of the store, is trying to provide more services inside of the store. So not just selling you apparel, but providing tailoring. Is kind of the classic example. Or in our case, being a place where you can return inventory, not just from the merchant that you bought it from, but maybe, a network of merchants, right? What we created, what's being popularized, Amazon's kind of following the same playbook in their partnership with Kohl's. I think that, this idea of like, are there other services that the store can provide to be relevant to the shopper, I think is absolutely part of the equation. And again, I think there's this challenge with inventory as well, where the store is a place for service, the store is a place for trying on, the store is a place for seeing what's available, but the fulfillment of it may come elsewhere. I think that's very much a part of the future.
Yeah, and you're seeing the supply chain, all the economies around the actual retail like grow like crazy. I mean, even just my experience trying to buy furniture for my home, and it's never the vendor that I bought the product from. Like a couple are Serena and Lily, or I think RH might have their own delivery, but it's always like some other third party. And I think that's hard too, because the customer experience, you're no longer in control. You have some supply chain, you have another vendor that is impacting the customer experience of your product. So that's tough too.
I think, yeah, that extension of the kind of drop shipping model, right? Like, I sell, very, very wide online, but I may only be the one fulfilling portion of that. And these others are drop shippers that I sell their products. But that kind of compounds some of these challenges, right? I don't envy merchants that are trying to sell and be relevant online in this, because these are real challenges. And I think it sort of speaks to a new set of competencies that they either need to develop or work with, with trusted kind of third-party partners to be able to try to stitch together a consistent customer experience. I think is hard. It's really hard.
So with the changing nature of the financial industry, just the growth in how you can send money to people, I know PayPal, now there's a lot of players in that space of just sending money or paying people. Is your acquisition part of a new direction for PayPal that they want to shift and change some of their products and services?
I can't speak to that directly. I will say that I think, we are part of a theme at PayPal, which is expanding beyond the kind of core payments business. If you take a look at, there's another company here in LA they bought a few years ago called Honey, which was really focused on kind of the, kind of customer acquisition and offers space. Inside of PayPal, we talk about kind of pre-purchase, things that happen before the buy button, and then happy returns fitting into post-purchase. And I think that, we're part of this strategy that they want to serve merchants across the shopper journey, not just at payments. And so I think that, that's kind of where we fit in, is this idea of PayPal has this installed base of merchants. They want to solve problems for that merchant. It could be things like customer acquisition upstream. It could be things downstream like us. And Dan Schulman, our CEO, has talked a lot about the notion of the PayPal app becoming a super app, or this is kind of a theme. Financial apps becoming super apps, meaning serving more customer needs. In PayPal's case, more needs along the shopping journey, right? And so if you have customers that already trust your brand with your money, that's kind of the most important relationship there is. If you have a trusted brand in that space, and if that payment method is often used for e-commerce, well, why not expand the kinds of services that are provided along the shopping journey?
David, tell us more about this super app. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the thesis is actually drawing on consumer experiences overseas, specifically in China. There's an app called WhatsApp. I'm sorry, an app called WeChat, and WeChat has become, started off with chatting and then has expanded into other things like payments, things like commerce, social aspect, and the idea of the super app is that we all have phones that probably have, I don't know about your phone, but mine's got 4 or 5 screens full of apps that I use for individual tasks. And the notion of the super app is that over time there probably will be a handful of apps that provide much more utility, and instead of having 4 screens worth of apps, what we'll end up with is 1 or 2 screens. And many of those apps that we use for a single task now will actually expand and be able to serve us across multiple functions.
That is
So
very smart.
yeah, and so in the case of PayPal, you can think about a place that is my digital wallet, a brand that I trust, a place where I keep value, expanding into how I purchase, post-purchase activities. Right, it's the idea that that app becomes your home, and that app has a right to kind of serve you in some of the other tasks that might be in specialized apps. And so think about sort of the consolidation of tasks into a handful of super apps, and PayPal has an aspiration to be one of those apps. And I think candidly has a right to win. The hardest thing to gain is trust. PayPal has a globally recognized brand, millions of people that use it every day, and trust it with kind of the most important thing, which is transactions and stored value. And so has a right to win in many of the other kind of shopping related tasks that may be happening in other apps today.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to continue to track your progress as you continue on this journey. And I'm so happy for Happy Returns because I love the idea. I think you're doing a great job. And I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to be with us today, David.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to catch up with you, and it's always fun to talk to someone who's been following the story, because I do feel like it gets more interesting over time, not less interesting over time. And the problems that we're solving, I think, are as relevant today as they were 7 years ago when we started the business.
So if any of our listeners want to sign up or be a vendor on Happy Returns or partner with you, how can they learn more about the company?
Yeah, so our website, happyreturns.com, is a great place to start. There should be links there within, depending on if you're a merchant partner, a location partner, to kind of reach out, raise your hand, and ask for someone to contact you. But that's where I would direct anyone, is to happyreturns.com.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me. All of you have been tuning into the Modern Customer Podcast. If you have a minute, head over to Apple iTunes and leave me a review to help more people find this growing show. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.